And welcome back to another episode of the Credit Authority. I am so glad that you joined us today because, as you already know, we have an amazing lineup of people. But more importantly, right now, we are in political season. And as much as we don't like to support one party over another because we are all entitled to our opinions, I do have a very special guest with me today, and I would love for him to share his story and his passion for the reasons why he is running for highway. So with us right now, we have Michael Kaplan. How are you?
I'm great. Good morning, Rhonda. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So first of all, I know that you were a newcomer onto this political, I hate to even use the word political circuit, but
Yes.
what I'd love to do is start by letting you introduce yourself to the audience as far as who is Michael Kaplan.
Michael Kaplan is running for highway superintendent. I've been a highway employee for over 30 years, in 20 years in Islip and 10 years in working for the superintendent of highways in the town of Huntington. And sprinkled in there was 10 years of Army service, 5 years active duty, 5 years in the reserves, and two combat deployments, one in Desert Storm and 18 months in Iraq in 2010, 2011, which six of those months in Iraq was spent with my son while he was on active duty. So we spent the deployment together, not physically together, but in Iraq. And it just goes to show you, it tells the people what kind of public servant I am. I'm all about public service. So I've only had two jobs my whole adult life. I worked for the highway capacity and the Army. And I just want people to know that I'm just about public service, not politics at all.
And you and I spoke about that. And I think what's important, there are certain races where it really is about party and having party support. Where
Mhm.
it comes to highway, again, it is about public service, not necessarily about the party. We always want to talk a little bit about, what makes somebody qualified for their positions.
Mhm.
So, you have an amazing background, and thank you for your service as well as for your son, especially as we're getting ready to approach Veterans Day, which is
Thank
right
you.
around the corner. Um, I think it's important that you take a few minutes as well to walk us through why you have decided to run and why it's important to you.
Number one is I felt there was no other option for me but to run for this position. And I will outline very quickly what I mean by that. 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I was approached by the party that I'm registered with. Again, this is not political, and they said you're a once in a generational candidate, highway candidate, and I said this is a monumental task. Give me time to think about it. It took me a year to think about it, and so for the past year, what I've been doing is I've been walking the streets. I've walked nearly 300 miles of this town. I visited every hamlet of this town. I don't know if you have a big presence on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. I I speak to each and every resident. I answer their questions. They private message me, and what I found out was, and I don't like to cast dispersions on my opponent or any other political candidate. Uh, but with that said, what I'm going to tell you, Rhonda, are just the facts, and I always stay with the facts. There's too many politicians out there that they overpromise and underdeliver. But I know I can deliver because I've done it for decades. So I have a list of over 600 residents who have contacted the highway department and have not gotten a response. And and that's when I decided I need to run for this position, because many of my jobs was to answer residents within a 72-hour period, and that's what I'm going to implement on day one. So, and then plus the condition of the roads. Even though we can speak about roads all day, Rhonda, and potholes and all that stuff, but there's so many more layers to highway.
I was
Um,
just I love that you just said that because I think when people think of highway, I will be the first to tell you I got rid of one of my vehicles because I went through 4 tires and a rim just going from my house to the expressway. I live in Mount Sinai, again,
mhm.
town of Brookhaven, to the point where I literally got rid of a car just so I can go into a different vehicle because I could no longer afford it was no longer sustainable for me
Mhm.
to take that vehicle out in there. But I love that. Let's segue. You're saying there are many layers to highway and it's not just about the roads. So pick up from there.
It's not about the roads, but just to your point, Rhonda. First of all, I'm sorry that happened to you. Um, the way that the roads are just even maintained is a big reason why I'm running. These hands have filled thousands of potholes, have done many patches, and I've gotten so many residents who have said, "I just spent $600 on my front end," or like you, I blew out 2 tires. Um, and you're right. There's so many layers. Yes, everyone always talks about potholes and the road conditions, but there's actually even a larger issue than the roads in my professional view. Flooding, drainage. I have another list. I keep a lot of lists, so I apologize.
No, it's
Um,
okay.
Almost 300 recharge basins, which most people call them sumps, have not been inspected, and there's flooding in front of them. And as people know from Superstorm Sandy, um, stormwater ruins everything. It ruins everything. It could ruin your home. It could ruin your vehicle. And plus, if the infrastructure, and what I mean by infrastructure is the pipes and the catch basins below the street are not maintained, the or not swept. Don't even get me started on road sweeping, Rhonda. That road sweeping is such an integral part of what highway does. The sand and salt and debris on the roadway um, during a rain event will wash into a catch basin. It actually filters down over time into our aquifers and contaminates our drinking water. And that is not an environmentalist comment. That's a fact. That's just a scientific fact that anyone that knows anything about highway or the environment, um, actually conserving the water. To me, maybe I'm a little selfish, but it all starts on the roadway. We have to sweep the roads on a consistent basis, and I've spoken to many residents who have not seen a street sweeper on their road in years. I feel that every road should be swept twice, and this is why we can speak for hours about highway, because it's not just about potholes and patches and paving. It's not. So I'll leave it at that. So because I can go on and on and on, Rhonda, about highway.
And I think what's happening is as we're having this conversation, I am conceptually thinking about the comments that you're making. And I think, look, I'm no spring chicken. I'm 50 years old. I've been, in the town of Brookhaven for over 20 years. And I think that what happens is that when election time comes, a lot of people vote by party until they've had a personal experience
Mhm.
where they've needed to listen up and make changes. But just the mere fact that you're talking about street sweeping and how that integrates with our environment and our drinking water, which of course contamination goes hand in hand with health factors and other things that are happening here right in our own backyard.
Mhm.
I don't think I could express enough that I never made that correlation. Shame on me for maybe not being
Mhm.
more aware, but I
Mhm.
think if I'm unaware, others are unaware as well. So
Yeah,
with that, we're just going to take a quick commercial break. But Michael, please don't go anywhere because I want to make sure we pick up because I have a lot more questions for you. So stay tuned.
great, great. Thank you.
And welcome back. We are with Michael Kaplan right now, running for the town of Brookhaven Highway Department. And we were just talking about our water systems and how, street sweeping and how everything kind of integrates with the highway department. But I'm going to give you a sticky question right now. All
Sure.
the things that you probably have in your, I'm sure when you were preparing to run, you made a list, right? You already said you have lists all over. You
Mhm.
made a list, and it's a list of all the things that you want to implement to make Brookhaven a stronger town.
Mhm.
My question for you is that economically, our world is in crisis.
Mhm.
So, is it possible that some of the things that you are recommending to be done were not done because we did not have the appropriate budget in place to do so?
It's an unbelievable question. And again, when it comes to highway, Rhonda, I apologize. There are no short answers. There really aren't.
It's okay.
So I'm going to start with some of the debates that I have had with the current superintendent, and he has stated that he has received $150 million through grant money over the past 10 years. And I have asked him in a very professional manner, well, what projects were done? And he tells me, well, this road got done, that road got that this other road got done, but nothing about drainage. And flooding to me actually ruins people's homes. It could ruin everything, our drinking water, and it ruins the roads. Um, the current highway department has stated, and it's public knowledge, they have roughly $120 million a year budget. Um, I feel that since I've been running I've made this quote up myself. This road is road drainage fund deficient. So the only way that it's like your negative $2,500 in your checking account. Now, how am I going to get that money back so I can repair something in my home? So what I put a team of grant writers together, Rhonda, and they're ready to go. Um, as people know, you're a financial expert, from what I understand.
Mhm.
There's $400 billion at the state level of infrastructure money. There's also $1 trillion at the federal level of infrastructure money, and when they see my presentation, my PowerPoint presentation, and I will be there myself to show them. I don't want to use the word neglect, but the condition of our roads, the condition of our drainage, the employees. You know, when Dan Lasquadro took over, when he was first elected, there was nearly 400 employees. There is now less than 300. You cannot take care of a town properly with less than 300 employees. A town this size. Um, you have to. I mean, you can, but it takes a long time.
Mhm.
Say you have something, a broken curb in front of your home. In other towns where they have a sustainable workforce, maybe it'll take a month or two to get done. I have received letters from many, many residents who have been waiting years. And that makes me very angry because as a public servant, you cannot let people wait years that have an issue in front of their home. Um, it depreciates the home value. It stresses the resident out, and it's a basic service that the highway superintendent is just supposed to perform on an everyday basis. They have to be accessible. The superintendent, um, Again, I don't want to cast dispersions on Mr. Lasquadro. It's
No,
not
no,
an easy job.
I understand that. Let me ask you another question. So now you mentioned that when Dan took over, there was 400 people, and now there are maybe just under 300. Again, is that due to why would there be 100-person cutback? Is it again based on cutting back budget to then be able to maybe offer more service, or is it that positions were cut and then not refilled?
Another great question, but you have to understand, while in Islip, I worked for, I want to call it a regime. I know that's a terrible word to use. It's a very, polarizing word. But when people in Islip, when people retired, they don't backfill them. In Islip, they did the same thing, and the workforce got very diminished, and the services started falling by the wayside. The same thing is happening here. Why they're not backfilling people who retire or are fired for some sort of reason, or just get sick, go on disability, um, that is a question I cannot answer. But I have asked that question to Mr. Lasquadro. I've asked Mr. Romaine. Um, w- why aren't these positions filled? Because uh, I don't know if you know this. I'd like to mention I to get the endorsement for CSEA workers for their union in the town of Brookhaven. There's 3 collective bargaining units. Now, this actually all ties into money, Rhonda. Um, so I screened with the blue collar unit, the white collar unit, which I have been informed they are backing me. But there is a separate highway collective bargaining unit. And of course, they're going to side with Mr. Lasquadro um, for a lot of reasons. And, maybe Rhonda, it's really not the proper place to get into that because
Yeah.
I don't want to come across as negative or disparaging. But I have been informed the blue collar and the white collar have backed me because I've been a union leader and a union member for over 30 years. So they see the value of how I want to rebuild the workforce. And I know it costs a lot of money for one employee because of the healthcare. Healthcare, healthcare is very, very expensive. And that's why this town, when it comes to highway, is cash deficient. And that's why I'm going to have to rely on state and federal monies to get us back um, above board. And that's basically my plan, which I know my plan will work. I've spoken to grant writers. We're ready to go, Rhonda, on day one. So
And a lot of times no, and I understand that, and I think, there's a lot to be said for responsibility at this particular level when you're running, a
mhm,
township. And again, it goes back to combination of infrastructure, how the dollars are being spent, and again, like you're bringing up a lot of valid points, which is workforce and how much it costs to maybe bring some new people on board.
mhm,
My other question is, you're mentioning there are so many homeowners that have, um, they're waiting for some response in reference to maybe, you're saying a broken curb or, putting something together, maybe a sidewalk. I don't know what the level of responsibility, but if there's money sitting in a budget, but we don't have the workforce to do it, has it been thought about to maybe give a grant to the homeowner and let them go get an outside contractor to do it themselves?
I actually proposed that to the superintendent in Huntington, and we proposed it to the town board. It's funny that I think you know a lot about highway more than you know. We have, but
I'm a
there's
victim. I'm a victim, that's all.
you're a victim. There are so many different things that I can bring as a superintendent to 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 create revenue. The recharge basins have a program, adopt a recharge program. So, say a local Boy Scout leader says, "Oh, we're gonna put our sign on this recharge basin, and we're gonna take care of it." Maybe that's not a cash flow revenue, but what it does is reduce what we have to take care of the recharge basin
Mhm.
as
You're
highway
shifting liability.
who are shifting liability.
Mhm.
Number two is these huge cell phone towers that we see, that we rely on. There's actually in Huntington, what Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, they approached the town and said, we have these mini towers that can go on utility poles that are in the town right of way. Well, as you know, cell phones spend a lot of money to do so. So, I joke with the person that I've walked. We've knocked on thousands of doors together. She's running for district court judge, Cynthia Vargas, and that's not just a shout out. I'm just saying that that's who I walk with the most. And every time she calls me, she lives up in Miller Place, and her service is dead. There's no service. So I told her jokingly one day, I said, well, when I get elected, if I'm lucky enough to get elected, I am going to reach out to Verizon and ask them to install a mini cell phone tower on a couple of utility poles in the neighborhood she lives, and that will create revenue. That
I
will
love it.
absolutely create revenue for this town.
I think that you are onto something. Just for the sake of time, unfortunately, we do need to cut you short. But
Mhm.
if we don't have an opportunity to chat again, I wish you the best of luck in your upcoming campaign and run for Highway Department for the town of Brookhaven. So stay tuned. We're getting ready to bring you another guest.
Thank you so much.